Hey everyone, welcome along to the Transplant Strong Podcast. I'm joined by Lisa once again today. Hi Lisa, how are you?
Hi, good, thank you. We've got Reggie with us as well.
Yeah, and Molly's pacing around in the background.
How are you?
I'm very, very good, thank you. Very good. So today we're going to talk a bit about travel, I suppose.
Yeah, all things travel.
Yeah, travel
Because it's an interesting one,
post-transplant.
isn't it? Yeah, it's one I find that in like the groups and stuff, you see the same questions, and that's obviously because people get transplanted at different times. So it's always a recurring questions within the support groups, isn't it? So I think it's something good to discuss.
Yeah, it's really worrying. I mean, to go away for the first time after your transplant, because
Yeah,
I mean, as you know, you spend so much time with the hospital, constantly back and forth, and you kind of get released eventually, and you're down to from weekly to every 2 weeks to every month, and
I
so on.
haven't made it that far yet.
Yeah, you will get there. You will get there.
I will get there.
But yeah. So for me, spending that time away from the hospital and being nowhere near them was obviously a little bit anxious for
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah, it's like like when you leave hospital from the transplant, however long your recovery is, it feels strange, doesn't it? And I think most people say the same. You feel like you're walking away from your safety net.
Yeah.
And then you get used to being at home for a few days. And like you say, the gaps in between the clinic times for the majority of people spreads out, and you kind of get used to your zone. But then actually getting on a plane or a boat, or even just driving 7 hours away up to Scotland or something, it's another step beyond, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's nerve-wracking doing it for the first time, for sure. And there's always so many questions about what do I need to take and how do I get insurance and things like that.
Yeah.
You've been on at least one big exotic trip since transplant, haven't you?
Yeah.
Where was
So
it you went? You and Hannah?
Panama.
Panama. I
Panama,
mean,
yeah.
wow, like that's
Yes.
you've just like taken the biscuit, really. You haven't just gone somewhere that's 2.5 hours away on a plane and you could get back quite quickly. You've gone to the back of beyond in
Yeah.
Panama, so that's quite frightening. Like, how
Yeah.
did you
That,
feel
that
about that?
wasn't my first trip. My first trip was
Right.
a short one to Austria. My
Nice.
sister was working there. She had an apartment there, so I went and stayed in the apartment. So that was a
Yeah.
short one,
Dip
and
your toes in.
yeah, dipped your toes in. And for the Panama one, it was a lot of preparation. One of my friends was working out there at the time, and that's why we decided to go there.
Ah,
She knew I'd had the transplant, obviously, so she had made tons of arrangements before we even got there. Spoke to friends and said, "Look, my friend's come in. He's had a transplant. If anything goes wrong," because we went out to the islands. So
yeah.
we flew into Panama, then went out to the islands. So there's no hospitals, there's nothing like that there. So she spoke to her friends, and luckily, the job that she had, she'd come in contact with some really affluent people, and a couple of them had aeroplanes and stuff like that. So she said, "Look, if anything really, really goes bad, I can contact someone and we can get you off the island pretty quickly and to a
I
hospital."
love
So
that.
that was, but I think she was probably more worried than I was in a way.
You're
But it
quite
was
laid
very,
back, aren't you?
yeah, but it
So
was very reassuring to have to know that.
yeah, yeah, I have been away, even though currently now I'm uninsurable. And I actually have been away uh, since I haven't been insurable, but I've made sure I've gone to places like staying with Justin's mum, for example, lived in Portugal. So she knew the medical system, the
Yeah,
language. So I felt comfortable going there. You know, it's just like going to the in-laws. We got friends in France, so we went and stayed with them. And I have like a basic insurance through my bank anyway, which covers anything which isn't to do with transplant. But I now think everything is to do with transplant. So like there was minimal cover there for, you know, if there was a road traffic accident or something. But I think as long as you go somewhere where you've got like those connections, if you're feeling anxious about it, it can make you feel, you know, make you feel a bit better if you know there's someone in the country that you know, or you spoke to your doctors and they know a doctor that works in, you know, because normally the transplant people, like the doctors, the surgeons, they all know each other, don't they?
yeah,
And if you say you're going somewhere, they tend to know someone from that country. But I think one of the big things is medication.
yeah,
Taking enough.
take enough. So that there's a few sort of points that I really want to touch on. So there's obviously the insurance that we talked about. We can talk about that again in a minute.
Yeah.
But for me, the 2 trips that I did, that's what I wanted to say is, for me, obviously, it was just making sure I had medication for both of them. And, you know, that meant packing enough medication in both my bags so that if one bag, so my carry-on and my holdall, I had medication in both. So if one bag got lost, I always had meds in the other. Yeah. So you do not want to put them all in one bag, and then that gets lost at an airport, and then you're stuck.
Yeah, and you need a letter alongside it. So whenever I go away, I print out my latest hospital or clinic letter, which has got all my meds on it. And also, I have all my tablets as they are, but I take the boxes, but flat pack them. Yeah. So, and I know I might be a bit far-fetched with this, but it was one piece of advice I've always followed. I always take 3 months worth. Even if I'm going for a week, I take 3 months worth, because you just never know. Like, think about, what was it, the Icelandic volcano? People got stuck places for months on end. And if you're stuck somewhere that doesn't have the same type of tacrolimus that you're on, you know, so it's better to cover all bases and have enough stock with you, aren't you? And that letter and those packets, so the hospitals, you know, different languages, they can look at the packages, find a similar brand, or, you know, at least speak to your hospital and find out what they need to do.
Yeah, there is always, before I was had my transplant, I went traveling and I was on meds anyway. And there is always the option, obviously, if you're prepared enough and you have enough, is to get some sent out to you.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because I had that before. I was working on an island in Greece. It was one of the party islands, and my meds got sent out, and I had to go to the police station to collect it, because obviously loads of pills turning up on an island full of party people, they were a bit suspicious. So again, I had to turn up with all my letters, like you said, and like the doctor's notes with all on to prove that it was what it was, and they went through it. And
it's better to have all that stuff with you, isn't it? All the official documentation of everything. And if you don't need it, then great.
Yeah.
You know, if you come back with loads of, you know, everything, and you've come back on time and you've had a wonderful week away, then great. But it's just about covering those bases, and making sure that you're safe if anything were to happen. Like you say, like a bag gets lost, or you end up stuck somewhere for whatever reason, or delayed, whatever it may be. So yeah, never take the right amount of meds. Always takes extra with you, for sure.
Yeah. And then, so to move on to insurance. So when I went to Panama, I don't remember getting insurance, to be honest, when I went to Austria. And we went to Gran Canaria last year, and I totally forgot about insurance again. But when we went to Panama, we definitely got insurance. I can't remember who it was through. We just Googled, but Hannah had a big operation. My partner had a big operation at the same time. So our insurance was ridiculously high for both of us, but because we were going to where we were going, you know, it was just so worth it.
Yeah, we've always been those that, like I say, we've always had it with our bank. We've always made sure we've got cover. I'm a bit of a freak when it comes to stuff like that. I just think like the worst is going to prepare for the worst. And I think that's probably set me up well post-transplant, I guess. And I remember the year that actually, for my first year post-transplant, after that initial 6 months when they start saying you can travel, I got a yearly cover out, and we did actually go skiing in that time, which was great. And that yearly cover was like over £1,000, but I wasn't allowed to go further than Europe. I wasn't allowed on a cruise ship. So I think for people who have more of a, you know, smoother recovery and less complications, that price does start to come down. And one of the main questions, I think, when you go through all the questions within a insurance documentation is, have you had rejection, or have you had a recent hospital stay? So those two things, I think, are the bits that if you say yes to either of those, it's going to start pushing the money back up. But there's no point in saying no, because they'll always find out, and then you're void anyway. So you've got to be truthful with these things. But I use Stay Sure for that particular insurance, but there's loads out there, isn't there? And sometimes your nurse, like for me, like I've got a great team of liver nurses, or your consultant are willing to write a letter if you need a bit of like backup documentation to help with bringing that insurance cost down.
It can get expensive, but it's totally worth it in the long run if anything ever happens.
Do you know what? If you've been given extra life, go and enjoy it. Go and see the world. Don't sit at home being frightened to do things that you would have done before. Like, if anything, go and do it more. Like, I think people don't really embrace life until they've been through something so shocking, which is really sad that that's the case. And it's like this wake-up call and a lightening, and it's not just transplants, it's many different trauma events that can make that happen. So in a way we're really unlucky because we needed a transplant, but actually we're super lucky at the same time, because I think our gratefulness of life level has just gone through the roof, because we've gone, oh, we nearly didn't make it, and now we've got the opportunity to. And if anything, you've got to just go and live your life for your donor, haven't you? So find the insurance, take the extra meds, get on that plane and have a great time.
Yeah, definitely. I think there might be people wondering as well that are just before their transplant whether holidays are even doable after a transplant. And obviously, there's tons of people that I know that travel all the time.
Yeah, all the time. I think everyone, I think pretty much everyone I know. Some of them have just stayed to UK trips because they feel safer doing that, or that's what they like to do before. There's so much to see in this country. Why wouldn't you? But yeah, I think even if it's just a weekend away, of course, it's safe to do it as long as you're in a good place, and your team, just update your team as well. If you speak to them regularly enough, if you're still at like regular clinics, but just check in if you're quite close from transplant. I think for me it was about the 6 month mark, 6 month to 1 year mark, where they started going, yeah, okay, then not a problem, you can go away, but stick to Europe, and they kind of put the regulations on it. Was that the same for you, that kind of time frame? Or did you ask?
I think so. I mean, the first 6 months I didn't plan on going anywhere, But then COVID came actually, so there was no travel.
Of course.
There was no travel anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
It kind of came at a nice time for me, because all I was doing was sitting at home recovering, and then I was forced to I was forced to recover. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything really, because everyone was just doing the same as me.
Yeah, that works out quite well.
I think.
Go on.
I was going to say, I think you made a good point about, just even UK trips or whatever country you're from, is just test the waters and go for a short trip somewhere and see how you feel. And
yeah, absolutely. I forget you're international, Danny, and people will be tuning in worldwide. Yeah. Your own, like everyone's own country has got so much to offer, isn't it, at the end of the day? So if you are worried, if you are anxious, do a one night and then a weekend, and then like a Monday to Friday, but there's other things that come into it post-transplant. In recovery for a long time, people may not be at work, their pay may have reduced, so it is also about trying to find the best deal and feeling safe whilst you're doing that. So I think everyone's different, aren't they? But reach out to friends and family who live in different areas of the country that you're in, or in a different country, and see if you can go to stay with them. I think that's a good toe in the water, like you did, like I did. That's a flight, you're going through the whole airport scenario, but then once you get to the other end, you're staying with someone which is really comforting, I think.
Yeah, no, you say they know the area, they might know the medical system, so you just have that extra reassurance.
Yeah, makes you feel a bit better. And then I think the other thing is, especially from us from the UK, when we go away, we tend to go to somewhere where the sun strength is much higher. And of course, we've got much higher risk of skin cancer. I think it's like 200 times higher risk of skin cancer. So we're even being here, we're supposed to be wearing at least a factor 30 every single day in the UK even. So it's really important that when you're abroad or somewhere hotter, or during the hotter months, that you take all of those things into consideration as well. Like, you do need to find shade, you do need to reapply your sun cream, wear a sun hat, all that kind of stuff. So there is more to think about when traveling post-transplant, but don't restrict yourself. Like, speak to the community. There's other people out there who've done it and experienced it, and watch this chat here, and I think you'll pick up some tips. But just don't restrict yourself. As long as you cover all the basics, go and have a great time.
Yeah, I don't know if you follow, I think it's Travel with Transplant on Instagram. She's a pilot. And she flies all over the world now. Obviously having to take her meds, but
she all different times as well, isn't it? So she does loads of great tips on how to manage that, because obviously being a pilot, she's flying through time zones frequently, whereas on holiday we may just cross into one and then on the way back. So it's you can get all the apps nowadays, don't you? I've got MedSafe, an Apple phone has a medication version, and also just setting your alarms. I haven't been anywhere since transplant that's had a huge time difference, so I've kept to my same time. So what would be, for example, 10 o'clock in the UK might be 11 o'clock somewhere else, but I would take it at what would be the equivalent to the UK 10 o'clock. So yeah, so there are, like, if you look into Instagram and places like that and just type in the search for travel transplant, you'll come up with the accounts that tend to have top tips around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I say, it can be very nerve-wracking to go away for the first time, but it is so freeing and just so nice to go and experience life.
Yeah, just get away. I think if you sit on it and think, I want to do this, I'm gonna do this, you know, I want to go away, but I'm a little bit frightened about the food and stuff, just be really cautious. Like, I would stay away from shellfish, stuff like that. Stay away from ice cubes unless you know they're bagged. You know, because food is a big thing post-transplant. We've got to be really careful because we can't handle food poisoning like anyone else can we?
This is another thing. I went to Thailand before I had my transplant, and I got food poisoning there on the last day, and I was so ill. But I think if I was in the UK, I would have gone to hospital. I felt that ill, but I was too scared to go to the hospital in Thailand, so I just read it out and hoped that it was food poisoning and wasn't anything more serious.
Yeah.
But that is a very good point, because if I went back now, when I was there, I was eating from all the street food stalls, like.
You wouldn't do that now.
Yeah, just driving along in your moped and you see a stall just cooking chicken on the side of the road, and I'd go and try it.
Yeah.
And I would definitely be 10 times more wary now. I'd probably stick to hotels and actual restaurants rather than
buffets.
And
Buffet
street
of
food.
doom. Yeah, street food. God, yeah, I'll be the same. I'd stick to restaurants where I can pick, you know, like if you're going to have a steak, how you're going to have it cooked, rather than it just being everything laid out. Buffets give me the absolute fear, because obviously people just walk along them and they stand having conversations, and the kids have touched everything, and then they're, you know, hands on all the food. So for me, buffets are a big no. Sometimes that can't be helped, and so in those situations, I think get up earlier. You know, if it's a buffet breakfast, get in there first. And also, hotels are really accommodating. If you go to them and say, look, I'm immunosuppressed, I have to be really careful with certain foods, I'm allowed this, this and this, I'm not allowed this, this and this, can you plate me up something from the kitchen so I've not got any risk of contamination? I've never had anyone say no to me. You know, I think if you're kind and you appreciate their time and you're patient, I think anyone is willing to help anybody. It depends how you go about it, doesn't it? But things like brushing your teeth, buy bottled water. Like, don't be using the tap water if you're in a country which hasn't got filtered water. You know, so it's all things like that. So it's everything that you would be cautious of at home, be cautious of away, but 100 times more, because there's no point in risking it. You don't want to risk it. If you think something looks a bit dodgy, don't touch it. You know, it's ice in drinks in bars, just check, is it bagged ice or do you make it from tap water? They won't mind you asking that question. You know, and you drink out of bottles rather than the tap machines, because you don't know how frequently they're washed. So I think there's some precautions that you just have to up a bit and be a little bit more vigilant with, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, and you can hear all that, and it can sound quite nerve-wracking and scary, but it's you know, it's totally doable. Like I say, there's so many people that travel, and
self-catering.
Yeah.
You know, then you don't have to worry about any of that, and you can pick and choose the restaurants which you look like, because you can also like look up online, can't you, and see where's got good reviews and the food ratings. I know different countries have different ones, but all of those kind of things, there's so much stuff online now to help you navigate that. But you're right, it does sound scary, and if it's your first time, you kind of think, oh my goodness. And I think because generally wait times for transplant are so long, and you can't go on holiday whilst you're waiting unless you're prepared to be suspended from the list. I certainly wasn't prepared for that, but I waited 4 months, so I don't know how I would have felt if I waited 3 years, you know. So I think you've had that whole time from when you've been listed right up to the transplant, however long that may be, of not going anywhere, sitting with a packed bag at your door or in the boot of the car waiting for a phone call. Then you get your transplant, and then you've got to navigate, okay, right, so I haven't been away for 2, 3, 4 years. Now I want to go away, but I can't sit in the sun. I can't eat shellfish. I can't do this. Can't do that. You know, I can't go to anywhere that hasn't got a transplant unit. The world suddenly feels smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's really important just to reach out to other people in the community and find out other people's experience. And we've all got different top tips and stuff, haven't we?
Yeah, and like you say, it feels like you can't do this and can't do that, but you can. You just have to be slightly more cautious, but you can still go and do everything. Like in Panama,
Absolutely.
we still went quad biking, we went snorkeling in the sea, we went to every single beach we could. We just did everything. Yeah, you went skiing. I think I'd be a little bit worried about that, to be fair, in case I fell onto my stomach, whereas
I was at first, and I actually but to be fair, I have skied for a long time, so I'm confident on 2 planks of wood. So if I was a brand new skier, then maybe not, but because that's something we've done every year anyway, it was the first thing I wanted to get booked up for me. It was
I bet
really
that was
important.
So nice, just having that freedom to go down the hill
invigorating again. And actually I was super nervous, got on the skis, and I made myself do a tumble, like just literally sat down basically, if you like, because I needed to see how my core was going to work to be able to get back up. Needless to say, Justin had to help me. He had to pass me a stick and I had to pull off that. I didn't have the core to be able to lift myself back up. So what that meant for the rest of the trip is that I just made sure I was skiing with somebody, or I didn't fall over, one of the two, but that can't always be helped. So you can go out and do everything. You just, like you say, needs to be a bit more vigilant, a bit more organized, but just go out there and do it, and you'll feel so much freer once you've done it. And there's nothing better than looking online looking at the community, post-transplant people, and seeing all the fun stuff that they're doing, and you just think, there's someone who's gone out, whether it's just a day trip, whether it's 2 weeks away, whatever it may be. There's nothing nicer than seeing someone go through all that hardship, knowing that they're still having a hard time. They've got, they're now immunosuppressed and they have to tackle so many other things, but yet they're still going out there and finding a way to have fun and appreciate the life they've been given. I think it's just makes my day whenever I see any of that online.
Yeah, I said that to my partner Hannah the other day. Just because I follow obviously people when they're pre-transplant. I've seen people there was a lady that I actually met in Panama that was waiting for a transplant. She messaged me when we were out there because she's following me, and she said, I'm waiting for a transplant, it'd be great to meet. So we just found the time on the last day. But now she's had her transplant and now she's out running. She's like an athlete, like full running all the time. And I just said to Hannah the other day, I was like, look at this transformation. It's just so nice to see.
It's so great to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone's transformations tend to be different, but when you do go to other places, and it doesn't always work out that you can meet up with people because everyone's got busy life. Like I love it whenever people come to the UK and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to be in London." I'm like, "Yeah, I live 5 hours away." So we don't all live in London, but I love it. The fact that they reach out and they're like, "Should we meet up?" And if I could go and meet everybody that offered to meet up, I'm sure the same would be for you. Then it would be amazing. But we've still got to work and earn a living and all that boring stuff, so it's not always possible. But going to Panama and meeting up with someone that you've met online and they're waiting for a transplant, it's just amazing. And it, for you, that was great to meet them, and for her, while she was waiting, to see someone go the other side and then traveled across the world, that must have given her so much hope.
Because just one last sort of thing, because I remember when I was having my transplant, or before, I had a meeting at the hospital, and there was this old fella there that was talking about his transplant, and he did nothing. He said, like, I don't shake people's hands, I don't go away, I don't eat this, I don't do that, I don't do this. And me and my dad were looking at each other like, God, this sounds quite bleak.
What's coming?
Yeah. And then I had 2 ladies that came round to see me at the hospital that were just transplant patients. They weren't staff, they weren't anything, they just go round. And they were talking about all the holidays they'd been on, and I was just so excited. I was like, this sounds perfect, like I can get away.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like, if people choose to wrap themselves up in bubble wrap, whatever the saying is, then that's fine, that's their choices. I completely understand it. There are times when I have to be extra vigilant. I'm on 4 immunosuppressants at the moment, so I should be probably a lot more vigilant than I am. And I think that does boil down to people's choices. But I think by having these types of conversations and sharing stuff like we do on social media, I think it shows people that it can happen. It might not be all the time. You might not be in the place where you can travel all the time, and always go away. It might not be advisable for a while, but when it is advisable and when it is possible, medically, financially, and all those things align, embrace it.
Yeah.
Absolutely embrace it.
Yeah. And even if you wanted to go traveling on your own, which is things I've done in the past, I'd feel totally happy to do that now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I'd be
I'd feel
quite confident to
comfortable.
do that.
Yeah.
I think if you always just have your, like, I'm not a fan of plan Bs, but I think in these kind of situations you need a plan B. You need to know, where you could go to if there was an emergency. So little things like that. Check out where your local hospital is. Check out, where the local doctor is, where the local pharmacy is, and just having those bits of information. You could be going to Cyprus for a week in an all-inclusive resort, and you don't plan to leave that place. But is there a doctor on site? Is there a pharmacy just down the road in case you get a bite and it turns nasty?
Yeah.
So if you just do a little bit of due diligence before you go away, and a little bit of, planning ahead, finding out this information, you have it all written down, and someone who's at home, just letting them know where you're going, when you're going, your flight numbers, your home, your hotel, a telephone number, and your room even, then you're covering all your bases, right? And it doesn't take long to do that kind of stuff, and then you can just go and relax knowing that you've covered all the angles of anything that might happen.
Yeah, you just summed it up perfectly. It's literally just doing all the prep before the holiday, getting everything sorted, making sure you've got all your meds, so that when you do go out there, there's just no panicking, there's no worrying. If anything goes slightly wrong, you're prepared for it, and 9 times out of 10, nothing goes wrong, and you have a great holiday anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You get a manky mosquito bite, we can deal with this. And that's the other thing, making sure you're taking your sun cream that we've talked about, but have a little first aid kit, because a mosquito bite for us can turn manky quite quickly, and they can get infected. So speak to your team. I know my team do, and I know a few other people I know their teams would as well. They'll give them precautionary antibiotics, and things like that, just so you can have them. So Cipro, something like that, so that you've got it in your bag. So if anything does turn nasty, and you've got 3 days before you're traveling home, you can speak to your team over the phone. They'll go, right, you've got your ciprofloxacin, whatever it may be, start taking that, and then come straight to the hospital when you get back. So it's just that precautionary stuff, isn't it? Just tying all that down and getting all that sorted, leveling up on the organization, and then that frees you up to have a great trip.
Yeah, that's actually really handy to know as well, like that you can get those pre-done just in case.
Yeah, I know lots of people that have had that done. I've always got a box of ciprofloxacin that sits in my cupboard. It seems to be like the standard one. I guess each hospital will be different. Each team will be different for different transplants. So, but speak to them, say, someone else who's got a pack of standby antibiotics because they're going away. And the worst they're going to say is no. And the best they're going to say is, here's a precautionary box of antibiotics. Don't take them unless we tell you to.
Yeah.
Because our transplant teams are generally available most of the time. Like with Kings, we can put an air call in and they'll call us back within a couple of hours, won't they? It doesn't matter what day of the week or time. And the transplant units are generally like that. Local hospitals, not so much. But again, if you just speak to them before you go, you're good.
Yeah, sounds good. Well,
I want to go on holiday now.
I know. We've got one booked for after. Actually, I'm going to France in September with my sister. We're driving over and taking the dogs and everything, so
a
lovely little holiday. It'd be her first holiday abroad. So
have you got a passport ready?
Yeah, passport, jabs, everything done. Again, all the prep done.
Yeah. Brilliant. What part of France?
I'm not sure. My sister booked it all up.
Yeah.
I'm just going along.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far because we're driving. I think it's like an hour or so from Calais.
Perfect. We did the same this year because we got friends that live out there, and we had the best time. We did the ferry from Roscoff overnight, from Plymouth to Roscoff. Then we had like a 5-hour drive, but the roads are so wide and straight, and just get on the tolls. They're really cheap. And then we just based at our friend's house, and we went around all the different chateaus and stuff, and they all drank wine and did wine tasting, and I sat with the chateau dogs, trying all the meats and cheeses. So I had a great time too. It was fabulous. It was lovely to see you, Danny.
Lovely to see you, Lisa. Thank you for chatting to me.
Thank you. Always a joy.
Speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.